Ten Commandments play a central role in our worship during Lent, as we read them at the beginning of each Sunday service each week. And with the commandments, we are reminded of another covenant. With them, the Israelites were given the structure they needed to live in freedom, maintaining a relationship with God and their neighbors. Now, just prior to our reading for today, God instructs Moses to prepare the Israelites for his being among them. Prior to the Exodus and during most of the wilderness journey, God spoke to Moses, who then communicated with the people. But this was different. God spoke directly to the people. They needed to hear this from him. And it was such an overwhelming, terrifying experience that the people begged Moses to be their intermediary in the future, thus establishing his leadership. Now, it's easy to divide the commandments into the ones describing what must be done to be in relationship with God and the ones describing what must be done to live in community. But they are dependent on each other. We cannot love God without loving our neighbor. And we cannot love our neighbor without loving God. The neighbor commandments reflect the character of God and what he wants for his people. God begins by reminding the Israelites that he brought them safely out of Egypt, out of slavery. He has been caring for them on their journey, providing manna, quail, and water for them. These were not just a list of do this and don't do this rules, but guides to right living for people who had never experienced any control in their lives and had never had the opportunity to make choices or decisions for themselves. Now, about a year ago, we were thrust into a life for which we were not prepared as the pandemic emerged. We had to learn when we felt safest shopping for groceries and other necessities. Recreational activities that we took for granted were no longer open or available, like swimming pools, movie theaters, and vacations. Now, as someone who had always associated the word Zoom with little boys playing with Matchbox cars, I, along with all of you, needed to learn how to attend church and other gatherings on our computers or telephones. And there's an ongoing challenge of maintaining relationships when you cannot be with people in person. Now, while our experience has certainly not been as complete a change or as intense as what the Israelites experienced, it may help us begin to understand the challenges of life when the status quo is no more. The Israelites did not know how to be free in a way that would maintain that freedom. This covenant was a gift from God, a demonstration of his love, just as the love of a parent for their child is demonstrated as they teach them how to stay safe and how to be part of a family. The commandments provided guidance for being in a relationship with God and for being in a community where all could be free. The principles were actually essential for the viability of the community and the kingdom of God. And to us, most of the commandments may seem like bullet points on a list. I found it easy to read them and mentally respond, of course, or of course not, as I go down through the list. Preparing for this morning has given me a chance to sit with them and go deeper. Let me share an example. I thought about keeping the Sabbath, what it means for me, and the implications for the many levels of community of which I am a part. It contrasts rest on the Sabbath with 6 days of work, honoring work but also honoring rest. It reminded me of my grandmother, who would prepare Sunday dinner for our family every week, a meal that always included mashed potatoes. She would peel the potatoes on Saturday and place them in a pan with water. When I asked her about it as a child, she explained that Sunday was the Sabbath and we should do as little work as possible. Then after dinner, we would all take naps, or at least lie down, which as a child I thought totally unnecessary. This commandment is inclusive, extending to all people, young and old, free and slave, visitors to the community, and even animals. It was a time when social distinctions were overcome. There was an equality in rest, and it acknowledged the worth and dignity of all creatures. It reminded them that they were created in the image of God, who also rested. Keeping Sabbath breaks the cycle of constant productivity, ambition, anxiety, and control, which have no place in the kingdom of God. I realize that I often consider the commandments from a standpoint of the individual, when they're actually communal. All people should have the opportunity to observe Sabbath. But what about those who must work more than one job in order to have a place to live or food to eat? What is my responsibility as a Christian to advocate for a living wage for all people? How can I be using my abilities to make it possible for others to receive the blessings of the Sabbath? What is a church's responsibility as a community to its neighbors? Time limits me from exploring each commandment this morning, but I urge you to think about them one at a time within the context of community and the impact of being in a culture that values things that are not valued by the kingdom of God. Lent is a time to examine what separates us from God and from what should be his kingdom on earth. It is a time when we begin our worship every week with the reading of the Ten Commandments. What if we were able to see God's law as the psalmist who declares it perfect and just, reviving the soul, giving wisdom, rejoicing the heart, and giving light to the eyes? What if we could see God's law as more to be desired than gold, sweeter than honey, and than wine? On January 10th, 4 days after the attack on our Capitol, presiding Bishop Michael Curry preached. And this may sound familiar because Carmen used this in her reflection this week. The words of Bishop Michael Curry: I am a follower of Jesus of Nazareth because I believe that his way of love and his way of life is the way for all of us. I believe that unselfish, sacrificial love, love that seeks the good and welfare and well-being of others, as well as the self, that this is the way that can lead us beyond the chaos to community. May it be so.